Hello everyone. In this lecture I want to talk about the different types of file systems. I'm mostly going to focus on Ntfs, which is New Technology File System. That is what Windows runs on and relies on because of all the features that Ntfs has, excuse me. But there are three other systems that the book mentions, and I want to talk about them a little bit. The first one is FAT, File Allocation Table. Now I'm going to open up computer management and get into my disk management to illustrate a few things. First of all, a FAT file system. And notice that most of these are all formatted Ntfs. So I'm going to take this bit here and I'm going to format it as a FAT volume. So when I do that, here we go. When I do that, I go in to check the file system and I say, nope, I want this to be FAT32. Now, FAT has a lot of limitations. It is basically just a table. It just helps the system organize the files on the drive and be able to point to the files on the drive so you can find them. And that's really well it does. There's a few other features that it has, but not many. Now the thing about FAT32 is FAT32 has a maximum size of 32 gigabytes. Now think about that. This drive up here, this is our 60 or 80 gigabyte, yeah, I had an 80 gigabyte drive here. And I used 48 of it, 50 gig of it basically, as the main partition for my system. I would not have been able to do that with FAT32. FAT32 had a maximum of 32 gigabytes. And we have these drives that are terabytes, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 terabytes now. FAT32 would only recognize the first 32 gigabytes of that file. So there's clear limitations, and there's a reason that we don't use FAT in most modern computing. Now, the reason FAT is still around is because it is cross-platform. Linux, Mac, Windows, all of them read FAT. So a lot of thumb drives are formatted in FAT, so you can just plug it into any machine and you'll be able to get at your documents. Now, what you end up doing though with FAT formatting is that you don't have a lot of the features that modern operating system file systems have. So you just have, all you have basically is data. You've got a table that points to the files on your data, and that's it. But it's very lightweight and it's cross-platform, so that's why it's used. Now the second type that is in there, in the book that I want to talk about, is UDF, Universal Disk Format. This is almost exclusively used, as I get down to the DVD drive, almost exclusively used for CDs and DVDs. And the idea is, again, like FAT, any file system can read UDF. UDF is cross-platform even more so than FAT is. And so they make CDs and DVDs UDF so you can take that disk and put it into any computer and it will recognize the disk. It may not be able to run the stuff on it, but it'll recognize that it's a file system and you'll be able to see the stuff inside the disk. But that is almost, like I said, almost exclusively used for optical media, for CDs and DVDs. Windows has the ability to both read and write UDF, so you can burn your own CDs and DVDs using Windows. So that's FAT and UDF. The other two that I'm going to mention, one very briefly, which is REFS, which is Resilient FS. Resilient FS is a new system that is still under development, so it's not fully functional yet. You can play around with it, but eventually it is going to be, Microsoft hopes, a replacement for Ntfs. It can do some of the stuff that Ntfs can do right now. It cannot do it all yet, so until Microsoft forces the switch, everyone's going to continue using Ntfs. It's a very mature, very robust file system with an awful lot of features. So that said, let's talk about some of these features, some of the things that you can do with Ntfs. One of the things you can do with Ntfs that I alluded to because I showed on the last video lecture is you can shrink or expand hard drives. If you have a hard drive that isn't using all of its space, I can take that hard drive and I can shrink it, or I can extend it depending on what I want to do. So first, let me I'm going to completely delete this volume. I'm going to get rid of my FAT partition, which would have just removed any data on it, but now I have space here. What I can do now with my other volume on this hard drive, if I right click on my volume here, I can extend my volume to take up the rest of this space, to use the entire hard drive. I can extend it and it'll ask me how much I want, and I'll say, yeah, I'll take all of it, thank you very much. And now it has. I've extended what was just a 5 gigabyte partition to the full 10 gigabyte partition. I can also do the reverse. I can shrink a partition if I want to use less of that space. I click shrink, and it'll cut down to, well, a much smaller amount that's being used, right? So this is actually the file system that's handling this. This isn't a disk feature. This is built into the file system that you can extend or shrink a volume depending on the amount of available space that you have on a disk, allowing you to then create more partitions. So that's one of the features of NTFS. That's one of the disk features of NTFS. Now let's talk about some of the file and folder features, because this is where NTFS really shines. So if I open up my File Explorer, let me go to my Documents folder. I'll just work in here. I'm going to create a couple of folders. If I've been doing this a lot and I haven't been talking about it. If I want to interact with the system, get a menu of my options in a system, I can go anywhere in the system. In this case, I'm in the middle of my Documents folder. If I right click, a context menu pops up with all sorts of things that I can do. In this case, in the File Explorer, one of the nice things I can do is I can create new stuff just by right clicking. I can right click in here and then create a new folder or a new text document or a new contact if I have some information I want to store quickly. So let me create a couple folders here. I'm going to create a compressed folder, which isn't compressed yet, it's just called that. I will create a secret folder, which is going to contain secret spy stuff that no one else can get. And then I'm going to create a hidden folder. Now these are all things that I can do with NTFS. In fact, let me go into my secret folder. I'm going to create a new text document. And we'll just leave it called new text document. Okay, so back out here. So let's take hidden first. If I want to hide a folder, I can do this with NTFS. If I right click on the folder and go to the properties, this will take me to the properties window. There are a bunch of tabs in the properties window. Some of these we'll actually talk about in this or the next lecture. One of the options here in properties in the front page in general is hidden. So if I check hidden and then I click OK, that folder is hidden. I can't see it. It didn't go away. It's still there. I just can't see it. So this is one way to basically hide things that you don't want people to deal with, right? And the operating system does this a lot. There are a lot of hidden files and folders within the operating system that are system-specific files and folders that Microsoft didn't want the normal user to mess with. And that's all they did, was they made it hidden. Now, how can you see hidden folders? If you go up to the view menu and click on it, the view menu comes down. One of the options over here is hidden items. If I check this, I will get to see hidden items. Notice it looks just kind of a little more transparent. So it's a hidden folder, but when you see hidden items, you'll see the hidden files as well. Okay? So now let's go on to compressed. If I have a lot of data, like a lot of text data, and I want it to take up less space, I'm running out of space, or I'm concerned about space, I can use the NTFS system to compress my data and then uncompress it at will. So if I'm going to read a file, I click on it, I don't have to actually uncompress it and open it. The file system handles that. The file system saves it compressed, but then shows you the full file. It's pretty nice. So to do this, I'll right click and go back to properties. In properties now, I'm going to go to the advanced attributes where hidden was. If I go in the advanced attributes, I have a couple of options. One of them down here, compress or encrypt. So if I choose to compress the contents and then click OK and then OK again, that folder and everything in the folder is going to be compressed. Now notice, you see how the icon has changed and it's got that little green thing up there, little arrows. That means I have a compressed folder. Hidden folder is kind of transparent. Compressed folder has a little green up here in the right corner. Anything I put in this folder is going to be compressed, and it will take up less space. Okay? All right, so finally, let's talk about secret. Let's say I want to have an encrypted folder. I want a folder that the only person that can read is me when I'm logged in. Anyone else logs into this machine as anybody else, they will not be able to get at this folder. That's the idea. So let's go back to properties and go back to the advanced attributes, and we will encrypt the contents secure data. So I can select that and OK and OK. Now, you've confirmed that I'm making it encrypt. What this asks me at this point is, do I want to encrypt everything, the folder and everything inside the folder? Because remember, I have that text document in there. The answer is yeah, I want to encrypt everything in the folder and the folder itself. Ta-da. And then down here, if you can't read this, it's saying back up your file encryption key. This is part of the system that we'll talk about later. It's not as important yet for our purposes. But you are able to recover your data if something happens and you lose the ability to get into your computer. Like say the system crashes, your hard drive is good, but your stuff is all encrypted. You got to be able to get at it. So there's an encryption key that you can use. But let's take a look. If you look, I'm going to try and open this up a little bit so you can see them as larger icons. All right, so you see compressed, we got the little arrows here. Secret, we've got these little locks here, the little padlocks. That's telling you this is an encrypted folder. Now, I'm logged in as me, so I will not have any problem getting in and seeing my files and opening them up. Notice the file is encrypted as well. If I were to log out and log in as a different user, I would not be able to see this text. So if you give me a moment, I will get myself logged out and logged into someone else, and I will show you what that looks like. Okay, so I am now logged in as a guy called Bob. All right, so Bob is logged in. That's me. That's user X. That's our user, and we are logged in as Bob. See, Bob. Okay, so now if I go to user X's folder, because I can do that, go to this computer, local disk, users, user X folder. Uh-oh, I don't have access. So let me get access to the folder because I am an administrator. Dun, 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 and I've got user X's password, which is my super secret password. That gets me in. Okay, so now that I'm in here, let's take a look in Documents and Secret. New text document. Uh-oh, I don't have permission to open this file. Why not? Because it is encrypted. I can see that it's there, but I can't access it. Even though I have his password. I have user X's password and I was able to get in, but I'm not logged in as user X, and so I do not have permission to access the file because we have encrypted it. Okay, thank you, Bob, for that demonstration. And let's switch over to user X. I'd like to talk about two more things that we can do specifically with disks. The first thing we can do with Ntfs and disks is disk quotas. Quotas are the ability to limit how much data one can use on a drive at any given time. So if I get to the file system here, if I right-click on the disk, on the drive, local disk C, and I look at the properties of that disk, there is a quota tab. This quota tab is not here if you don't have Ntfs. If you have an Ntfs system, then it will be there. If you have a FAT formatted drive, you will not have quota. So if I click on quota and have it show me the quota settings, here we go. So these are the quota settings. If I enable quota management, I am now I'm able to limit the space for new users, specifically new users on the volume. If I limit the space, let's just say I'm going to limit it to 2 gigabytes. That means any new user that comes in, that logs into the system, they will be able to have a maximum of 2 gigabytes worth of data in their user folder before something happens. And what that something is, I get to decide. One thing I could do is I can deny the disk space to the user. So when they hit 2 gigabytes, if I have this checked, the system says, no, sorry, you are not allowed to put any more. You reach your limit. I can also, if we remember the event viewer from the other lecture, I can select some events to get logged. For example, when a user exceeds their quota or when they exceed their warning level. The warning level I get to set, and it doesn't have to be the full 2 gigabytes. It can be close to it. But when they get close to it, they get warned, hey, you're getting close to your limit. You might want to delete some stuff. I can actually log whenever this happens. So I can go back if for some reason the disk starts filling up, I can see who's been using how much data. So I may not be explicitly denying them after their limit, but I can check to see who's been using their limit. Okay? And to give an example of what a quota entry would look like and how we would set a warning level, if I click on quota entries, in here there aren't any because we just created it. So if I created a new quota entry, I can say what user, let's use Bob as the guinea pig. I won't actually be using him, but there. And I can limit his disk space to that 2 gigabytes that I was talking about. But maybe I'm going to set the warning level to 1.8. So if I set the warning level to 1.8 gigabytes, that means when he hits 1.8 in his disk usage, a warning's going to come up and say, hey, you are coming close to reaching your level. And then if I had that checked in the quota management, I would have an event triggered and sent to the event viewer that Bob's getting close to his limit. Okay? So that's how that works. Let me get out of these here. And I will not apply it right now. But this is something you can do if you have a lot of shared users, a machine that a lot of people are using. You can keep track of and or limit how much people use, how much disk space people use with their documents. And that's another NTFS thing. Now, one last thing I want to talk about with NTFS, one last feature that's a really cool feature, and it's actually probably underappreciated, and that is the idea of mount points. Now, mount points are basically the letters, the drive letters that we're talking about. Okay, so we have right now, as we last left it, we have our C drive that has our operating system on it. We now have a couple of other drives that were pools and one regular drive left. Now, if I don't want those letters, if I want those letters to be something else, I can just change them. A reason you would do this is a lot of times systems that are on a larger network that are part of a company, they have these drive letters that are specific to a certain role. For example, the F drive would be the finance drive, the M drive would be the management drive. And so you would have these drives that would be mounted on specific mount points. This is possible because of NTFS. So a way I would do that, if I wanted to change this, say this, I wanted this to actually be the management mount, the folder, a management drive, and not the F drive. So I want it to be M, just so everyone knows M drive is management drive. If I right-click on the volume, one of the things I can do is change the drive letter and path. If it's not a hard drive, if it's not a physical drive, so I am going to change the letter that I want it to be. I'm going to make it the M drive, and it'll warn me that some programs expect it to be on the F drive, and I'm fine with that. There's nothing in there, so okay. And now it's the M drive. It's that simple to change the mount point. But this can be pretty useful. Also, sometimes, like it was just saying, programs expect certain drives to be certain letters. Like, in general, we expect the operating system to be the C drive. In general, people expect the DVD drive to be the D drive. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's supposed to be the E drive or whatever. Different programs may require it in a specific place. You can go and change these mount points just by right-clicking in the area and selecting which letter you want. Okay, so we covered a lot in this lecture. We talked about the different types of file systems, and then I went over the NTFS, some of the specific NTFS things that you can do, some of the features, including encryption and compression, and shrinking or extending drives, quotas, and mount points. Now, the next lecture I'm going to give is going to focus specifically on permissions, file and folder permissions within NTFS.